Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lakeside Sanitarium.
Where are you?
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and visit with one of our residents. Interaction is a very important part of his therapy, and you volunteering to participate is very much appreciated and will hopefully be very beneficial to his recovery.
Where are you?
Now, there are certain rules you must abide by. These rules are for your safety and the safety of the patient. They are no sudden movements, no foot tapping, and no staring into the patient's eyes. And if you have a cell phone or a beeper, please turn them off now. These are the actions that are most likely to set him
to
upset him. No, don't let him frighten you. He may get a little forceful if he talks at all, so please be patient. David was found in the house of an elderly gentleman whose whereabouts will remain undisclosed.
Go ahead, tell
He
me.
was found wandering aimlessly, babbling, laughing, and violently thrashing about as if frightened to death.
Frightened?
He has been diagnosed as suffering from delusional paranoid schizophrenia.
It's a lie.
But we're actually not quite sure.
Because it's a
But
lie.
he's here now, so I'll let him tell you his story.
Let me out of this.
David,
What?
your friends are here.
Let me out of this. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I have been and am. But why would you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heavens and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered the brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. An object? There was none. Passion? There was none. I love the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. And for his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. It was this. He had the eye of a vulture. A pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just about midnight, I undid the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, When I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern. Closed. All closed. Closed so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. You would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. Oh, I moved it slowly. Very, very slowly. So that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my head within the opening so far that I might see him as he lay upon his bed. Oh, would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well into the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed. And so, it was impossible for me to do the work. For you see, it was not the old man who vexed me. Please, evil eye! And every morning when the day broke, I walked boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name, in hearty tones, and inquiring as to how he has passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. Old Watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Oh, never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening his door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved upon the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were closed fastened through fear of robbers. So I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily, steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastener, and the old man sprang up in the bed and cried out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. And presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew that it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not the groan of, pain, or of grief. Oh, no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, while all the world slept, it has welled up in my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echoes the terrors that distracted me. I say, I knew well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since hearing the first slight noise when he turned in his bed. His fears had ever since been growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy the causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "Oh, it is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. Or, it is merely a cricket that has made a single chirp." He had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found it all in vain. All in vain. Because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within his room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a little, a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single thin ray, like the thread of the spider, shot out from the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull, pale blue, with a hideous veil that chilled the very marrow in my bone. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over acuteness of the sense? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. Oh, I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, like the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier to courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the vulture eye. But in the meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say. Louder and louder. Do you mark me well that I have told you that I am nervous? So, I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amidst the dreadful silence of that old house, So strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. But the beating grew louder every moment. I thought that the heart must burst. It grew louder, I say, louder and louder and louder. Oh, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into his room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I pulled him to the floor and dragged the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily at finding the deed so far done. But for many moments, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the walls. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still thinking that, well, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took in the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, the arms, and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of his chamber and deposited it all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so carefully, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot, whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught it all. When I had ceased from these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. What had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. The suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The street, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure and undisturbed. And in the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their present fatigues, while I, myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot which beneath reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they spoke of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness until at length I realized that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt now I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound steadily increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, thick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the sound steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I'd been sitting and grated it across the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder. And still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no. They heard, they suspected, they knew they were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. Oh, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. Oh, now, hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. Thank you so much for coming. Edgar Allan Poe, classic American literature at Cedar Point. Send them a note and let them know what you think about that. Okay, if you can exit over here, get right back in line. We have 2 more Edgar Allan Poe classics, The Black Cat and The Raven, coming up. So I want to thank you all for coming. You've made this very successful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.